The Broad Street Bullcast is sponsored by you. Sponsoring our Growing Flyers podcast is an inexpensive and effective way to market your company or product. Contact us on Twitter or email for more information. Hello, everybody. I'm Sam Carchidi, and welcome to our Broad Street Bullcast. We took a week off last week. My crack producer, my son, also named Sam, and his girlfriend Caitlin were scaling the mountains of Peru and on vacation, and I think they had a much better week than Flyers fans because it was a dismal time last week. First, Oscar Lindblom was bought out instead of James Van Riemsdyk. There was little action in free agency on the Flyers' part, and of course, the big news around Philadelphia was that Johnny Gaudreau did not come home, and then we're also going to talk a little bit about the draft because we took some time off when the draft was held, and Cutter Gauthier, as I predicted, went 5 overall to the Flyers. Solid pick. I like the pick. I would have preferred that they traded down and took Matt Savoy. I think Gauthier probably has more upside than Savoy because of his size, but I think Savoy, as I've mentioned before, is going to be a dynamic player. Savoy, for those who don't know, went number 9 to the Buffalo Sabres. And if the Flyers could have traded down and picked up a second-round pick and Savoy, I would have done that. It's unknown if Chuck Fletcher tried to do that. But in any event, they got a solid player, a guy who played mostly left wing last year, will be a center for Boston College next season. And it looks like his goal anyway is to sign with the Flyers after 1 year at Boston College. So Flyers did well in the draft, not just in the first round, but with the other picks. They did not have a number 2, did not have a number 4. Chuck Fletcher traded those picks away. And speaking of Chuck Fletcher, for me, he gets a failing grade for free agency. No Johnny Gaudreau. There was no trade to bring Alex DeBrincat here, a young superstar. There was no free agent that the Flyers can build around. And to be clear, I don't think, one free agent is going to make a difference, but I think the Flyers should rebuild. They should tear it down. But I think you need a star player to build around, much like the New York Rangers did with Artemi Panarin and a lot of draft picks. They stockpiled draft picks. You need a high-quality guy to build around. The Flyers have some good players, some very good players. Sean Couturier, a real good player in Kevin Hayes, good player in Ivan Provorov, but they do not have that star quality player, a guy like Johnny Gaudreau, a guy like DeBrincat, and not clearing cap space for Johnny Gaudreau was strange to say the least, especially when a 6-time All-Star wanted to play in Philadelphia. It's not that often over the last decade that a high-quality free agent has wanted to play in Philadelphia. Gaudreau, of course, is from South Jersey. I talked to his dad last week, Gabe, before free agency, and he told me Johnny wants to play here. But Fletcher did not clear the cap space. Instead, he signed Tony DeAngelo. That was $5 million. He also signed Rasmus Ristolainen. Risto signed during the season, late in the season. And if you didn't sign those two and you went for, say, a right-handed guy like Justin Braun, who they actually signed, and maybe Ronnie Attard, you took your chances on him. He's probably not quite ready, but you put him on the third pair and see how he does. Then you could have had a superstar here in Johnny Gaudreau, and maybe you could have worked a deal for DeBrincat, but Fletcher did not make that happen for whatever reason. And Johnny Gaudreau earlier this week on Spit and Chicklets said that it would have been quote unquote cool to be playing for the Flyers. It's a team, of course, he rooted for as a kid. He said it would have been great to be playing alongside Kevin Hayes again. Hayes, of course, played with him at Boston College, and Hayes tried to talk Johnny into signing here. Tony DeAngelo tried to talk Johnny into signing here, but it turns out they were talking to the wrong person because Johnny did want to sign here, but Chuck Fletcher did not clear the cap space, and as a result, Johnny went to Columbus. And in effect, it may actually be better for Johnny. It's going to be more quiet, less media attention there. Uh, his wife right now is expecting their first child, and you won't have all the hoopla that he would have with friends and relatives here. Again, he wanted to come here, but in the end, it might work out better for him to be in a more quiet setting. Columbus is a team on the rise, unlike the Flyers right now, and Johnny's in a pretty good spot. But again, it's not often that you have a six-time All-Star that wants to play here in Philadelphia. That ship has sailed, and there may even be a silver lining in Chuck Fletcher whiffing on Johnny Gaudreau and not getting DeBrincat here. The Flyers now are in a position to contend for Connor Bedard, who is going to be the number one pick from all scouts I talk to next year, and he's also going to be a generational player. He's a center. The Flyers are going to be in the Bedard sweepstakes, and it's a deep class in 2023. So even if they don't get the number one pick, let's just say they get 2 or 3, they're going to get a very high quality player, probably much better than this year. So, was it an accident? Is Chuck Fletcher trying to tank? Of course, he'll never say that. We'll never know. Chuck will never say that. But stay tuned on how that works out, because the Flyers, again, not landing a big free agent, not landing a big player in the trade market could actually work for them, because to rebuild, you almost have to get top 5 picks in consecutive years or 2 out of 3 years. And they got one this year at number 5 with Gauthier. And, it's a good bet they're going to get a top 5 pick next year. And we have a lot to talk about in the mailbag portion of our show. We got lots of comments, lots of heated comments. Flyer fans are not happy. We'll be back with the mailbag right after this short timeout. Broad Street Bullcast is sponsored by you. Sponsoring our Growing Flyers podcast is an inexpensive and effective way to market your company or product. Contact us on Twitter or email for more information. Hello, and we're back. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for all the great questions. We had, I think, over 50 questions, and can only get to maybe 8 or 9 of them. But really appreciate the input and the great questions. Let's get right to it. Mike at MikeB2199 asks, why is the organization so afraid that fans wouldn't accept an actual rebuild done properly? I think they'd be surprised if they were just honest with us. A common theme with most Cup winners in the last 15 years is that they had top 5 picks in multiple drafts to build on. And Mike, you're preaching to the choir. I agree totally. And I've said that before. I think they need to build from the ground up. I think you need to stockpile draft picks like the Rangers did. Giving up 3 draft picks for Tony DeAngelo, didn't like that. And they're sending mixed messages right now. I mean, are they in a rebuild? By going after Tony DeAngelo and giving up the future 3 draft picks, you said this is the aggressive retool. By clearing cap space and getting rid of Oscar Lindblom, you said that, we're going to open up room and sign somebody for the aggressive retool. And then you do very little in free agency, and you signed a 3rd or 4th line left winger, just Lauriers, who to a 4-year deal. It's just very puzzling. It just doesn't seem like there's a plan right now. And I think that's all the Flyer fans want right now, is a plan, and a consistent plan. Right now, from the front office, you just do not see that. And to me, it's time to gut it. And but I also think you need, as I mentioned before, you do need a star player to build around, even with a rebuild. And that did not happen either. So, just very disheartening right now. Go with the kids, I say. And getting back to Oscar Lindblom, no, he's not a kid. He's 24, maybe 25. I would have given him one more year. I'd much rather see Oscar Lindblom out there right now than James Van Riemsdyk. Is Van Riemsdyk going to give you more goals? Probably. Maybe you can get something for him at the trade deadline. But right now you want to find out about Oscar Lindblom. This is his first camp and his first year where, he's been able to work out in the off season, and maybe he's not able to come back to where he was a couple years ago before the stunning cancer diagnosis. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't, but I think Oscar deserved one more year. And of course, he signed with San Jose quickly after the Flyers bought out his contract. But again, I think the Flyers management is sending mixed messages, and it seems like there's no plan out there. Next question, not Blauser. I think it's a Braves fan here. And at Flips to Lemke, definitely a Braves fan. He asked, if Ryan Ellis doesn't play, Kevin Hayes continues to be banged up, and Sean Couturier doesn't return to top form, could this be the worst team in the NHL and a legitimate contender for Connor Bedard? Well, not Blauser. That's a negative picture. I don't think all that's going to happen. But if that all does happen, there's no question they will be a strong contender for Connor Bedard. Kevin Hayes, let's take him first. Kevin Hayes came back last year, and I think over the last month or 6 weeks, he showed that he is back. I think Kevin Hayes will be close to 100%, maybe not so much in the beginning of the year. I think he'll gradually get into form. I think he'll be a 20 to 25 goal scorer. Sean Couturier, a little bit of a different question, because we don't know. We didn't see him. We haven't seen him since early last season, so he's a question. I expect it'll take him a while to get to form, but I think eventually, maybe the second half of the year, maybe the second 2/3 of the year, he'll be back to his old self, and he's a top line center on the team and a very good player. Ryan Ellis, though, is a big question. Chuck Fletcher has been very sketchy simply because the medical information is sketchy. So I would say right now it's probable that he will not be ready for the beginning of the season. But will he be ready in November? Will he be ready in December? Will he be 100% at that time? We really don't know. He's coming back from the pelvic injury, and I think right now they would be happy if he came back and he was 100% by December. But again, it's a wait and see, and you can't fault Fletcher. You can't fault Ellis. It's just something that has to play out. And if Ryan Ellis is 100%, then this defense falls into place. It's a lot better than last year. Last year, of course, it was a miserable defense. Everybody was kind of out of joint. You had Justin Braun playing on the top pairing for most of the year. At the beginning of the year, it looks like Tony DeAngelo is going to play with Ivan Provorov, from what we were told the other day by Fletcher, which is a little surprising. DeAngelo is not a very good defensive defenseman, very good offensively, and he's going to help their power play. He's going to probably quarterback the first unit. But as far as defense, a little bit shaky, so we'll see how that plays out. But to answer your question, a lot of balls in the air. I think they will be a contender for Connor Bedard. How much of a contender? He got some weak teams in Seattle and Arizona and others as well. But I think they'll be in the mix. I don't think they'll be the number one team right now, but they will be a contender for Connor Bedard. Next question comes from Ken Schott at Slap Shots. And Ken asks, why did the Flyers treat equipment manager Harry Bricker so shabbily? It's not his job to score goals. Good question, Kenny. For those who don't know, I've been told that Harry Bricker is no longer going to be the equipment manager. That's what I'm hearing. Again, that has not been confirmed by Chuck Fletcher. I did text him. He did not respond. But two sources from the Flyers organization and another source outside the organization told me that Bricker has been told he will not be back. Again, we're waiting for confirmation. I do not know what that's all about. I do not know if it's related to the lawsuit that has been filed by the Flyers' two trainers. That's Jim McCrossan, of course, and Sal Raffa. And I'm not so sure if they feel Harry is somehow connected to that situation. Again, the Flyers are very mum. They said because that's in litigation, they can't say anything else. For those who don't know, McCrossan and Raffa, unfortunately, have a rare blood disorder that is life-threatening, and they say it came from the Zamboni at the Voorhees practice facility, and there's a lot going on there, and whether Bricker has been dismissed and it's related to that, I do not know, but it has not been a good summer so far for the Flyers, public relation-wise. There's no question about it. Benny BG 2200 asks, what is the actual draw for top-tier players to come here anymore? We used to be a destination franchise. Is management concerned? Well, they should be concerned because you're right, it's not a destination place for players as it was, in the 80s and the 90s and before we had a salary cap. And that's what is so puzzling. Again, I hate to keep going back to the Johnny Gaudreau situation, but here's a guy who's a proven player. Granted, he played with some top players on Calgary, but if you've watched Johnny Gaudreau, you know how dynamic he is. You know how the Flyers need dynamic players. They really don't have that. And that's what's so curious. He wanted to play here. He wanted to be with the Flyers, and Chuck Fletcher had ample time to clear cap space, and it didn't happen. And again, if he didn't re-sign Ristolainen, if he didn't sign DeAngelo, and as I said, if he gambled and went with Ronnie Attard and Justin Braun, and Zamula is down there in the minors, he's a possibility as well. If he did all that, he could have had Johnny Gaudreau here, but maybe John Tortorella is the guy that is the draw. Benny asked about who is the draw. Who draws free agents here. Maybe it's John Tortorella, very respected coach. One of the best coaches around, has a Stanley Cup on his resume. So whether Torts can kind of steer free agents here, that's the hope anyway. Rob Wyatt asks, and Rob is at Rob Wyatt 84. What do they see Elliot Desnoyers? When do they see him coming to the NHL? And the second question, Rob asks, if we're able to trade JVR at the deadline, what could they get if he's healthy? And let's say he has 15 goals. I think Desnoyers will probably be here in 2 years tops, maybe 3 years. As far as JVR, his contract has been an albatross, $7 million, and this is the final year. So if you do trade him at the deadline, it's not an albatross anymore. I think he could probably, if he does indeed have 15 goals, and that's not out of the question. He's still a scorer. He was down last year, scored most of his goals the last 6 weeks of the season when the season was already shot to hell, if you will. But he is a goal scorer. He is a good guy in the power play. And if there's a contender out there that needs somebody on the power play, that needs a goal scorer, needs a big guy in front of the net, I think he can get at least a second-round pick for JVR. As I said, his contract will no longer be an albatross at that time next year. Luke, who the Ash City is his handle, he asked, could or should the Flyers try and move Ivan Fedotov's contract, and what can they get in return? For those that don't know, just to review, Fedotov is a goalie. I think he would have been the number 2 goalie this year for the Flyers, and I think he would have pushed Carter Hart. Unfortunately, he is stuck in Russia. He wanted to come back here. He wanted to come to North America, wanted to be at the Flyers camp. Looks like, barring a last-minute miracle, he will not. He's in the Russian Navy now, and he's a 6'7" guy who starred in the KHL last year. To answer your question, what can you get for him? I don't think you can get much at all. Right now, as much as a question mark he is for the Flyers, he's a question mark for any organization, unless an organization wants to take a flyer and throw like a 5th round pick at the Flyers and hope they can get him here in a couple years. But I wouldn't give up on this kid. Even though he's 25, but this kid has lots of promise, and I don't see it getting more than a fifth round pick. And at this time, his stock is worth more than that. So you're patient if you're the Flyers, and you hope maybe not this year, but that would be best case. But if you get him here next year, that would be the best case scenario. So I think they hold on to him because you're not going to get a lot for him. There's no question. Len Morella, at Morella, Len asks, do the Flyers have enough assets to acquire Matka and enough cap space? They would have enough cap space if they traded somebody like an Ivan Provorov and then made a minor move. Right now, they have no cap space. You're allowed to exceed the cap by 10%, of course, in the summer. If they traded Provy and, somehow made another move, that would almost get you there. He's probably going to get $10 million. And you say, well, you wouldn't sign Gaudreau at $9 million plus. Why are you going to sign Tkachuk? Tkachuk is 24. Johnny Gaudreau is going to turn 29 in August. So I think Tkachuk would probably be a guy that's more favorable to Fletcher than Gaudreau. Tkachuk had a tremendous year, like Gaudreau, had a career year, had 42 goals. He had 104 points. From what I'm hearing, his dad was a big star at St. Louis, and he grew up in St. Louis. So, if Calgary does trade him, I would not be surprised if he goes to the St. Louis Blues. The Jersey Devils have a lot of cap space. They were in on Johnny Gaudreau and didn't land him, so that's another possible landing spot for Tkachuk, because it looks like Tkachuk will be traded probably in the next week, maybe quicker. Charles at SCK8182 asks, why watch the Flyers this coming season? Good question, and a lot of people are asking that, Charles, but to me, I think watching these kids develop, if you're a hockey fan, watching these young kids develop, I think, is exciting. I'm talking about the Wade Allisons, the Morgan Frosts, the Cam Yorks, Noah Cates, Owen Tippett, etc. You go on and on. I wish Fedotov was here. I was really excited to watch Fedotov. Felix Sandstrom looks like he'll probably be the backup goalie. It'll be fun to watch him develop. Also, I guess you want to see Sean Couturier, how he comes back from his injury, how Ellis comes back from his injury, how Hayes responds from his injury. Are these guys going to be 100%? When are they going to be 100%? That's another thing to look for. And you want to see if Carter Hart is back to his old self. He had a horrible season 2 years ago, had an okay season last year. We need to see more from Carter Hart, and that's another disappointment with the Fedotov situation, because I thought he would push Carter Hart. Carter Hart needs some pushing, and but that's something else to watch this season. Carter Hart, where is he at? 3 years ago, he looked like he was going to be one of the top young goalies in the league. He was one of the top young goalies in the league. Can he get back to that level? Hopefully he will. And if the Flyers are buried at the All-Star break, let's say, if they're buried in the standings, you still want to root for these young kids. You want to see them progress. You want to see them make progress. But if they're already out of playoff, it sounds weird, but you may be rooting for the young guys to do well and the Flyers to lose games, because that'll help you in the Connor Bedard sweepstakes. And you don't want to be negative. You don't want to root for losses, but you just want to see some progress from the young guys. And but that's something else to watch, the Connor Bedard sweepstakes. It's going to be a strange year. I really believe that. I think without getting a marquee player here, with basically having a team that's similar to last year's, all you can root for is the guys that were out for most of last year, the Couturiers, the Ellis, the Hayeses, that come back to be 100% early in the season. For the young kids, the Morgan Frost and all, to make great progress. If that happens, if Carter Hart bounces back, the Flyers, will be a playoff contender, but only a playoff contender for the 8th seed. And to me, this is the worst case scenario. Even if everybody is healthy, everybody comes back and does their job, this team is at best a contender for a late seed playoff spot, and then you get a middle round pick, and that's a position you don't want to be in. You either want to be, a Stanley Cup contender, which they have not been for quite some time. It's been about 12 years, the 2010 season, when they caught lightning at the end of the season, and they were better in the playoffs, and they were a better team than they showed for most of that season. But they were definitely a legitimate Stanley Cup contender that year. Have not been since. So you want to be either a Stanley Cup contender or you want to be at the bottom. That's why I say break it all down, play the kids, and see where that takes you. I think one of our questions said you have to probably finish in the bottom 5 in a couple straight years. And if that happens, you make the right draft picks, this team can rebound. We saw it with the Penguins years ago. We saw it with Colorado. It could happen here, but you have to have patience, and it has to be done right. You have to have a plan, and right now, that plan is sketchy at best. But I want to thank you for the questions. I want to thank you for the time. I want to thank my son, Sam Carchidi, for producing us. He always does a great job. And most importantly, thank you for watching and listening. Tell your friends about it. And as the late, great Gene Hart was fond of saying, good night and good hockey.